Game development is a very unpredictable thing. One moment you think you didn't get much of a hit in your hands, and the other one you have the biggest thing of the year. So big, in fact, that you are not prepared for it, and your servers cannot handle all of those players. But then you step up your game, fix the issues, and you leave your players mind blown, like wanting more and more of your game. And then something happens that makes you realize how the games industry can go from top to bottom in a heartbeat, literally overnight. Yes, in this video, I'm going to talk about Helldivers 2, and we have a lot to cover. You probably saw a lot of videos about it already, and I wasn't even going to make this, but once I connected more and more dots, the story simply became too interesting not to talk about it. Plus, I hope with my experience as a game developer, I can offer you some insights you did not have from other videos. The backstage of game making is a hell of a ride. Hey guys, it's Harry. I've been a game designer and producer for the past 10 years, and in this channel, I want to talk all about game production. So leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below talking about your experience with Helldivers 2. Are you having a great time blasting your friends? Because yeah, that happens all the time. And I'm like, why? Why? We're on the same team. Literally, the only team. Anyway, let's jump into it. Helldivers 2 was released on February 8th of 2024, and it was developed by Arrowhead Game Studios, the same company behind Magicka and Gauntlet. So they definitely know how to make good action games. Plus, of course, Helldivers 1. And the interesting thing is that Helldivers 1 was not as nearly a hit as the second game. And that says a lot about the games industry. It is hard. Even if you're surrounded by a great team and having Sony as your publisher, that's still not a guarantee of success. And Helldivers 1 was already a good game, a very good game. I had a great time playing it. But Helldivers 2 is at a whole nother level. In case you spent the last weeks in a cave, Helldivers 2 is a co-op, PvE, third-person shooter in which you play against swarms of alien monsters trying to defend humanity and spread democracy. Co-op is at the heart of Helldivers, and you can easily play with your friends or random people around the world. The gameplay makes it so that there aren't many disadvantages of playing with more people, so it really incentivizes you to play co-op. It is possible to play solo, and there are some extra challenges and rewards to it, but you can clearly see that the design of Helldivers 2 was made with co-op in mind. It has a very satirical narrative and visceral gameplay. The gunplay feels super smooth, which is a very, very big challenge. And I can tell that by experience, because with my current team, we are creating a AAA shooter, so we know how much of a challenge it is to get a good and smooth gunplay. All of those VFX and animations and timing, that satisfying feedback that you get when shooting enemies, while also being fun and strategic, oh boy, that's a lot. So first thing that I want to say here is that creating that kind of experience requires an incredible amount of time, effort, and talent. So kudos to all Arrowhead developers for that. Helldivers knows what it wants to be. That's very key to me. It's a very visceral, cooperative shooter with a lot of fun and literally explosive moments. Funny thing is that it knows what it wants to be since the first game. Helldivers 1 presented pretty much all of the concepts that you see in the second game. The hilarious narrative, brutal deaths, and frantic gameplay were all there from the start. So you see, the first game did not come even close to the second one's success. In game development, many times you have to insist, changing some things here and there, trying again a little bit different until you develop your game and your audience. And it's also a lot of luck. If you release the same game twice in different moments in time, one of them might be a big hit, while the other is a flop. The market is very dynamic and it changes all the time. I mean, sadly, one of the big differences from the first to the second one is the camera. Helldivers 1 had a top-down camera, while Helldivers 2 has a more flexible, over-the-shoulder camera following the player. And unfortunately, a top-down camera sends a very different message than a third-person one. A third-person camera makes the game feel more AAA, more realistic, and it kind of has a more massive appeal. I mean, don't get me wrong, I actually prefer top-down cameras in general. To me, they are more strategic and allow me to see my surroundings, which I love. But for most people, just this gameplay decision has a lot of implications for massive appeal. We can even talk about Baldur's Gate 3, which also has a third-person camera. Turn-based CRPGs usually have a more top-down camera perspective, like the previous Baldur's Gates. But the team at Larian Studios probably saw that a fixed top-down camera would give this older impression to the game, and it would not feel as AAA or as refined, maybe. Of course, there are dozens and dozens of reasons for Baldur's Gate 3 great and deserved success, but I will say that if the game had a fixed top-down camera, it's hard to see that it would be as successful as it was. And I think it's funny when people try to predict a game's success based on how the market is behaving at the moment, because it's so transient. I mean, game development takes time, right? Years. So if you want to predict the market, by the time you release your game like 2 years from now, it's all going to be very, very different. That is interesting to see because the old mindset of making games is to release a game and then forget about it and start your next thing. Like those days are pretty much gone now. Launching a game is nothing but step one. You still have a long way to go if you really want to be successful with your game long term. Also, early access is becoming more and more of a thing. Even games that you would not expect to go into early access, like Baldur's Gate 3 and Hades 2, have taken advantage of it. That's because with game development, having players actually play your game and give you feedback, it's as invaluable as ever. You know, in the old days, and I'm talking about the 2000s here, you pretty much couldn't do that. In the era of CD-ROM, you remember those? Yeah, that feels like an age ago, and for technology, it really is. In those days, companies could not simply release an early access version of their game, get massive player feedback, and use that to build a better game and more compatible with players' expectations. You know, even if you are a veteran developer and studio making the same types of games, let's say an RPG or a racing game, it's still super hard to achieve success and sustain it. Let's look at a very specialized and successful game company, like Paradox Development Studio. They pretty much create grand strategy franchises like Europa Universalis and Crusader Kings. That's what they do. They are the best in the world at doing that, and they have a massive fan base and decades of experience in that genre. It doesn't get any better than that for a game company. But even so, if you look at some of their most recent games, like Victoria 3 and Millennia, you see that they have mixed reviews on Steam. I mean, how's that even possible? They have created multiple hits already, and they have a loyal fan base. But as you can see, game development is hard. It's hard to have innovative ideas, it's hard to actually make a great game, to have success, sustain success, and maybe even more so, to repeat success. So when you see a game that you really like, that tells you something different, and makes you enjoy your time playing it, try to really appreciate that, because that takes years of an incredible amount of effort. I work daily with dozens and dozens of very talented artists, engineers, and designers. And it's impressive and it's scary to see that for the most part of the development, the game doesn't simply feel right. It doesn't feel great. The characters might look awesome and the gameplay might have a big potential, but to fully realize that and launch a game that's incredible to play, a game that sticks with you, it's something that usually only comes after years into production. And for Helldivers 2, a lot of things went right. And not only about the gameplay itself. The game is a premium game with microtransactions, something that is far from having good acceptance from players. Big companies like EA and Activision have a very bad reputation when it comes to those topics. But the Arrowhead team were smart, and I'd say that they honestly had the players in mind when designing the monetization systems for the game. You have your usual in-game currency, you have items that you can buy just by playing the game, and some others, more premium, that you probably need to spend real money. But the prices are mostly fair, at least for now. So what that tells me is that it's not so much about the model or just the model. It's not just about being free to play or not, or it's not just about having microtransactions or not. It's about how you implement it. Players can feel if your goal is just to take the last dime out of them, or if you're actually trying to create a system that is mostly fair and focused on delivering a better game experience. It also helps that Helldivers 2 is a cooperative experience, so the matters of pay to win are much less important here. It's not a real concern. And then PlayStation happened. Helldivers 2 is published by Sony. Initially, due to some technical challenges from Sony, you did not have to connect to your PSN account. And it wasn't clear for the players that you'd ever have to, like it would be mandatory. But then it was. And the PSN was not available in like more than 150 countries across the board, which is crazy. So a lot of people that were already playing the game suddenly couldn't play anymore. And boy, was the community pissed. But in this case, players really felt deceived and betrayed, understandably. I mean, you know that a lot of people bought the game and suddenly they couldn't play anymore. They would have to necessarily refund the game. I'm not sure how this move got approved by Sony. It is very clear that people did not think this through, and they paid the price. Helldivers 2 reviews were at first overwhelmingly positive, and suddenly it was overwhelmingly negative on Steam, one of the worst ever. You know, that review bombing practice has become a very common thing for many games, and to be honest, as a developer myself, I don't think that's always a fair move. I mean, for this case, I think it was. Players had a very clear reason to do that. But in many other cases, it is less than fair because the games pretty much never recover from the effects of the negative bombing, and that has implications on sales and how the game is perceived. After that, Sony went back on their decision and made the link to PSN an optional thing for the game. So reviews are coming back together, and I hope they get to overwhelmingly positive again on Steam, because that's what the game deserves. That's what the actual player reception was. So yeah, that's a lot, right? So many intricacies go into making a great game and sustained success. After all, Arrowhead is a team of veterans with decades of experience. Arrowhead was founded in 2008. That is 16 years making games in order to make one of the possible candidates for Game of the Year. That's why Helldivers 2 was such an interesting case for me, and I had to make a video about it. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.